My name is Erik Van Horn. I bought my first franchise in my 20s, and since then, I've owned 6 brands with 25 stores in 8 states. I've also helped 1,000 people find the right franchise for them. People like us who are not cut out for the 9-to-5 and like to work smarter, not harder. How do we find the right franchise, buy it, grow it, sell it, and how do we do it in a way to own the business without it owning us? Those are the questions, and I'm on a mission to give you the answers. Welcome to Franchise Secrets. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets podcast with your host, Erik Van Horn. And today's guest is Marcos Moura, and he is the CDO at Amada Senior Care. He's just a brilliant guy when it comes to franchising and marketing. I've been following him for a long time now, and just a tremendous amount of respect. So thanks for coming on the show.
You are very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And if you aren't watching on Facebook Live inside the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, we are doing take number 2, which is my second time doing take number 2 today because it's not recording automatically like it used to. So thanks for rolling with the punches. For people that don't know you, just to give them a little bit of your background, like how did you get into franchising and where did marketing fit into all of this?
So you kind of go a little far back. So I got into franchising back in the 90s. In 1990, my dad moved from Brazil to Minnesota, and I was 15 years old. And my dad was looking at things to do because he wanted to stay in the country, and he couldn't really find a job. And so he went to a franchise show, like so many people have done. Goes to a franchise show and sees a bunch of booths, and he finds Blimpies. And he actually was funny as I asked him, why did you acquire a Blimpies? And he said, well, it was cheaper than a Subway. That was the thought process for my dad. It was just, it's cheaper than a Subway. So we'll buy a Blimpies. And he actually bought an existing location in Provo, Utah, because one of his goals was to go back to Provo where the Mormon church is. We grew up Mormon in Brazil. And my dad was like a Mormon pioneer in Brazil. So he buys a Blimpies in Provo, Utah. And we owned that restaurant for 4 years. I think it was from 1990 to 91 to 95, I think it was, or maybe 96, I think in 95. And it was funny is my dad hated all of those 5 years. It was the worst thing he'd ever done. And I actually thought back then that would be my last experience in franchising. That I would never be part of a franchise again. And it wasn't a comment on Blimpies being a bad brand. It was a comment on the wrong entrepreneur acquiring the wrong brand. That was really what happened to my dad. So that was actually my first introduction to franchising was back in 91 when I was 15, 16 years old.
Did he ever go on to own other businesses, or did he go into the corporate world job?
Yeah, he didn't. He became a professor. So he still teaches business at a university in Texas today. In Brazil, he used to teach as an adjunct professor at night, and he had a recruiting business. He was a headhunter. So he had his own business in Brazil. He was an entrepreneur in Brazil, did very, very well. You think about the fact that we moved from Brazil to United States in 91, and my dad bought a house right when we got here to go from the Cruzeiro, the Brazilian, I think it was a Cruzeiro or Cruzado back then, whatever the dollar was called in Brazil, to be able to acquire that in the United States. He actually did really well in Brazil. But after Blimpies, I think he was done. He was done with being an entrepreneur. He wanted to go back to teaching. He loves teaching. He's 79 years old today. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. I don't think he wants his age out there, but
he's not even 80 years old.
Not even 80 years old. And he still teaches because he loves it. He loves teaching. And so he found his calling and he's very happy with it. But he said, no, he never owned anything after that.
Well, this reminds me of my conversation with Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He started talking about his dad and how he bought his first franchise. It was a franchise too. And he's like,
I didn't know that really.
Yeah. So, and it's not like I talk to Robert Kiyosaki every day. It's been once for an hour in my lifetime. Right. Yeah. But yeah, he told that story on the Franchise Secrets podcast. And it was much more colorful than I just told it to you right now. So you have to check that out. And don't listen to it around your kids though.
Wow, no way. Yeah, I think my dad would have had some choice words about it too. But it was a good experience for our family. it was a hard experience for our family because the staff was really my mom and dad and our my two brothers. And then we had some employees as well. But you know, the customer would come in and watch us fight with each other, you know, and there were so many uncomfortable moments, kind of soup Nazi moments at Blimpies that I learned a ton. And still today, like there's so many funny stories from owning that business. A lot of the friends that I had back in those days that I'm still friends with, we talk all the time about Blimpies. But it was a great experience. It was a great experience. I'm glad we had it.
A great experience because it was hard, or great like because of what came out of it, or is it a great experience as you were doing it? Like, would you have, like, looking back, was it really a great experience when you were experiencing it, or is it because of what you learned out of it and where you took it?
Straight up because of what we learned. I think hard experiences are good just for that, because of what you learn from it. If I could go back, I would tell my dad, don't do it. It was simply a bad decision. But it happened, right? And there's nothing you can do about it. It happened. And so the best thing that came out of it is going through that struggle as a family. And we're still a very close-knit family. We still love each other. And it was incredibly hard. My dad got really sick in the last year, put him in the hospital. And so my mom and my two brothers and I, we basically kind of ran the business while my dad was getting better. So it was awful. It was terrible. But the experience and the learnings from it, and even today, so much I think we've learned so much that it changed every one of us in a very unique way.
Talking about COVID,
even those failures, right? Those crazy failures we have in life change us more than our successes, I would say.
100%. I agree with that. I mean, and you and I both know people going through some difficult times right now because of COVID. Yeah. I mean, it is not easy. And some people are changing and they're learning from it. And they're going to do different, they're probably not on the other side of it right now, but they're going to do business differently moving forward. You know, there's whatever it is. I know people that are looking at changing their diversification play is opening in a different country versus all in the US.
Wow, no way.
Or it is, I might want to diversify from state to state. Because before, diversification just meant, you know, a second location or third location or a second or third or fourth brand. Now, if you have all locations in New York or in California, it's very different than if you had locations, one in, you know, Timbuktu and South Dakota, which probably don't want to have anyway. But, you know, let's say you were in a state like Florida or some different states that were more open up to different like gyms. Right now, some gyms are doing just fine. Some gyms are just really, they can't open and they're losing money. Same brand, sometimes the same owner, different states, they're making different kinds of, you know, either a struggle or they're making money out of it. So diversification is just, I think that's changing for franchisees and franchisors anyway.
It opened our eyes, right? That politics has always affected where we want to do business. That's right. You know, Texas has always been friendlier than California, but this type of malarkey that's happening in California is going to cement, I think, a lot of entrepreneurs thinking twice about where they do business. You're absolutely right. I don't know if you've been seeing Andrew Gruel, the CEO of Slapfish.
I haven't.
And I'd love if you guys are listening to this, please go to Instagram and search for Andrew Gruel. He's a I don't know if I'm saying his last name correct. It might be Gruel or Gruel, but
I was going to say, do you know how to spell it?
Yeah, the guy's amazing. He owns Slapfish, which is a franchise. I think they have 30 or 40 locations throughout the country. Incredible chef, incredible food, and he's really taking on the establishment. And he's raising money right now. He's raised, I think, over $100,000 to be able to give to other restaurants that are struggling, not just his restaurant, but to restaurant and restaurant workers who are struggling. He's here in Huntington Beach. He's an amazing, amazing entrepreneur. But it's guys like that I think are fighting back and helping restaurants either stay afloat or figure out a way to open back up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Times like this, you see the best and the worst in people, right?
You do.
you get to
Yeah.
see some, you just look in the news and you can see you can see whatever you want. You turn the news and you can see a lot of bad stuff, but every now and then you'll see a story of somebody doing something really cool to help people. Another guy that's doing a lot of that, the Prophet, Marcus.
Yeah, that's right. And in
He's,
fact, Marcus donated $25,000 to Andrew's cause, which I thought was just amazing. So these guys are banding together, and I just think it's. I know that we need to be careful. I know that the pandemic is real. It's not something that's been just invented. People are getting sick, people are dying, but there's a lot of entrepreneurs in California and other states that are suffering way above and beyond this pandemic because they can't feed their families. And I think it's really quite a terrible situation. So my heart
it's,
goes out to a lot of these entrepreneurs that are really struggling.
yeah. And it's easy. Like, I live in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota. If I didn't have friends that it was actually impacting and know
Yeah.
how it's impacting them, or I didn't
Yeah.
have businesses that it was actually impacting, it would be, like I would have different opinions. But I know people that are losing many hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're losing millions of dollars of real money this
Yeah.
year.
And I think
And
it's fascinating because Andrew had somebody comment and he shared that with me, and I was shocked. Somebody commented, because he goes on Instagram and he sort of rants. He's like, guys, we in the restaurant industry, we need to be able to pay our bills. We need to be able, there's got to be a safe way for us to do this. We've gone outdoors. We've spent tens of thousands of dollars creating outdoor places for people to eat. Like while Target and Costco and Amazon are able to stay open, for people to go and buy, plushies or video games, right? But and however you feel about that, what's interesting is he got a message from somebody, and that somebody says, "Hey Andrew, it's just the restaurant industry is broken. What's great about this pandemic is it's going to thin out the herd. A lot of restaurants are going to close, which we need to do anyway, and people in the restaurant industry just need to go find better jobs." And I was like, how can you be that callous? Like that just rolls off your tongue, that you're able to type that online and say that to a restaurateur who spent his life building restaurants, who has managers and cooks and servers and all these people depending on them. I think that's what's interesting about our country is that, like you said, you're in South Dakota and you're not as effective, but you have a heart. You know what it's like to have your friends suffering. And I think it's amazing that some people can see this suffering and just sort of, roll it off and be like, well, it's not my problem. I'm not in the restaurant industry. So I think there's some callousness going on there, but I do hope that that's the exception. I think for most people out there, I still choose to believe that, that we're good people, that we want what's best for others. And again, I do think we need to find a way to help our brothers and sisters who are running restaurants and other businesses to reopen safely.
Yep.
There's got to be a way.
Here'd be my advice to somebody that is, and I just thought about it too. Somebody that, and because I am that guy, I've taken my own advice without it being advice. If you are on one side of the fence or the other on this whole COVID thing, business thing, go talk to somebody that or somebody that knows somebody that is losing their business because of the pandemic, and go in curious. Don't go in condemning or just try to keep an open mind, and just from human to human, learn about them and why it's difficult for them. Same thing if you don't know anybody that's had COVID, that's had an impact on their life, that has maybe had a family member die from it or something like that.
For sure.
Like you just form your own opinions by talking to people that have actually gone through the stuff, and your opinions might just change. But that's just getting to know, that's just like having your own opinions and learning and being curious. I think too many people are too quick to judge, too quick to say something, too quick to be, in some ways being told what to believe or how to believe it, instead of just going out there and caring for your fellow human.
Yeah. In every way possible, right?
Yep.
For those affected by COVID business-wise, by those affected by COVID health-wise. I mean, all of it is real.
Yep.
And I think our heart goes out to every single one of them, right? And it's a complicated issue.
Yep.
But I think you're so right, man. You're so right. We got to just have more empathy for all sides. You know,
One of the big
empathy is a big thing.
100%. And one of the coolest things that I've seen that have, we talked about before, I can't remember if it was live on here or it wasn't, but this brings out the best and the worst of people. I think we were talking about it just a little bit ago, and we're seeing even in franchising and business owners that are helping each other out. And, and franchisors that are stepping up, they're stepping up their game. Maybe they weren't the greatest franchisor to begin with, or they didn't have, or maybe they were just, kind of getting lazy with their franchisees. But I've heard from numerous different franchisees that their franchisors are really stepping up during this time. And I've seen franchisees step up as well. So it's good to see this whole industry, for the most part, really doing what they should be doing. Franchisors helping out franchisees helping out each other. And then people like you and me just going and trying to give value in whatever area that we can. If you had any advice to give a franchisee that's struggling right now, what advice would you give them? Or maybe they're not struggling and they're looking for opportunity. What advice would you give them from the position that you sit?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one, because I've been there before. You talked about people that lose their business. In 2008, I lost my business completely. We're talking,
dude, this is going to be good. I don't know this full story, so I'm glad you just went there.
Yeah. 2008, it was funny about the pandemic is that it has sort of united us in understanding that people are going to fail, right? And there's sort of this understanding and even a little more compassion. 2008 was weird because that didn't really exist. If you think about it, in 2008, when everybody was losing their businesses, there was no COVID package. There was no $1,500 check or $600 check. There was no, you can't evict. It was simply, you lost your business, you lost your home, and it's done. There were bailouts of the big businesses, and no judgment on if that was right or wrong, but it was just treated differently. So when I lost everything in 2008, it also came with a much bigger stigma of failure than I think the failure is now. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really hard. So I've been in that situation. And the only advice I think that I could probably give is one thing that I did back in 2008 when I lost everything, when I was trying to park my truck in different places so the repo guy wouldn't take it. Eventually, the repo guy knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I need the keys to the truck that's already on my rig." And I, sheepishly went and said, "Here's my keys," and like total failure, complete, just lost everything. I foreclosed on 4 homes, foreclosed on 2 office buildings. It was horrible. But the problem was this. The problem was that I became so fearful during that period that I couldn't move. I couldn't operate. I couldn't talk to my friends anymore. I became kind of a crummy husband because I was so scared. It was the first time I had failed. And I really thought at night that there was some way that I was going to go to jail or I was going to be arrested, or that I would never, ever recover. And I was, like 29? I was a kid. And I know that right now it may seem callous for me to tell you, if you're going through a situation like that you're going to be fine. You're going to be okay. I know that it seems right now that you're never going to recover, that this is the nail in the coffin, that everything you've worked for is gone. And it may be true, but you will come out of it. And the biggest thing that you need to make sure of is that you don't give in to fear. And one of the reasons I give in to fear is I stopped talking to people. I had nobody counseling me because I was so embarrassed. I didn't know how to pick up the phone and call somebody that I respected and say, "Hey, I'm going through bankruptcy. I'm losing everything. What should I do?" I didn't talk to anybody. I hid it and I tried to just put my head in the sand and make it go away. And it obviously doesn't go away. You have to deal with it. And the last thing I'll tell you, I'm not going on here, but last thing I'll tell you is if you don't give in to fear, you'll come out of this faster than if you are fearful. Because when you deal with it head on, you deal with your landlord, you deal with the owner of the location that you're renting right now, you deal with your franchisor, you deal with your creditors, and deal with it head on. Don't hide. You'll recover faster, and you'll get onto your next business faster than ever before, which wasn't the case for me. It took me a decade of embarrassment to finally just get over myself, which is ridiculous.
When you first started how long were you quiet about it? How long did you kind of hide it before you like started being free and talking about it?
Not until I had some success that I feel like I could talk about it again, which is also pretty crummy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's much more admirable for the person going through the failure to be able to talk about it openly. Now, I'm not saying go on Facebook and say, I failed, here I am, but find people that you admire, find people that care about you and love you, and work these issues out with them. And especially business people. And all of them will tell you, take a breath. You're going to be okay. We can work through all of it. That's what's wonderful about our country. You're not going to go to debtor's prison. You're not going to lose your children. You might have to go live in a small apartment. You might be kicked out of your house and go live with your in-laws, which I did. But none of that is going to be definitive and the end of your life. None of it is. None of it is. Your kids will still be successful. You will still be successful someday. And you're still every bit as charming and amazing and talented and able as you were before you failed. You just got to go try again. You got to start over.
There were, people that achieve success, whatever that is. For me, when I was in my early 20s, it was making 6 figures a year.
Yeah.
That was success to me. And then at some point, it crosses the 7-figure mark, and that's success. And, and whatever that number is, and I've had experiences where I've made a lot, and then years where I haven't made a lot.
Right.
And as I reflect back on that, I didn't change how I related to people, how I interacted with people, whether I was making, less than 6 figures or over 7 figures. It just didn't matter. I still related to people the same way. I still had my own insecurities and I still had things that, my confidence, where I was confident in who I was, and it wasn't related to money. So that was, as I look back, it's, and I've not gone through a challenge like that. So I don't know how I would relate, and how I'd respond. But I do know that there are people that I'm around that have gone through that, and they wouldn't judge me for that. And they would want to help me through something like that. And so I think the advice that you gave is just incredible, because you're out there online, people follow you. I get to hear from my audience, and they tell me the things that have impacted them. So man, I appreciate you sharing that, because I know people are going to listen to that, and they're going to need it at the time that they listen to it. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet. Anybody going through something like that, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk to you and walk you through. I had a friend of mine that went through this before the pandemic. It was a few years ago. He was going through bankruptcy, and I was so happy because I had shared with him more privately that it had happened to me, and I had no idea he was going through it. What's funny is I didn't know this guy that well, but I had no idea he was going through it. And he called me up and he said, "Hey, you gone through this? I'm going through it right now. I haven't told my wife. I haven't told anybody that I've gone bankrupt." And I was like, "You haven't told your wife?" And I was like, how do you even get away with that? Like, he goes, I am so scared. And so we talked through it. And I hope that was helpful. Anybody that wants to reach out, do, because it's such a lonely, scary time that doesn't have to be lonely, scary time in our country. We're not in some third world country where you're going to, go to jail or something. You're going to be just fine. Failure is a part of being an entrepreneur. And what you're saying is true about, I wish that like you, I could have been better at dealing with it, but I was terrible at dealing with failure. It racked me. I was so embarrassed. It really put me in the dumps, and I
What
don't
are
wish
some
that on anybody.
What are some helpful things for somebody that to, just to not be prepared for bankruptcy or a big failure, but, like what advice would you have for somebody as you think about that? What I think is just how I work with my teams. You are going to fail. I
Yeah.
set them up to not to fail, but I set them up to not always be right. And it's okay to not always be right. And, like you and me that are out there a little bit more publicly in front of people, I talk about my failures. I talk about the things that I'm not great at, and I'm comfortable with that. And I think, I want my team, the people that work with me, the people that are in my masterminds, I want them to be okay talking about this type of stuff when there are failures. I mean, I had a franchise that I failed with 1 out of 6, but I was okay talking about that, and I have other friends that were in that failed at a franchise, and they weren't okay. They wanted to put on a different face, and I was okay with it. So like, what is it? Somebody that's okay with micro failures or failures in general versus those that just want to hide? Is it maturity? What is it?
I think it's ego driven. I think the reason that I wasn't okay with the failure was I was so embarrassed of what people would think about me that I wanted to hide it. And what's interesting is the moment you realize that you're not that special, because ego makes you feel like you are really special, really talented, really amazing, right? And if you have that view of yourself, when you get clobbered and you come down and you realize that you can make mistakes, that you are going to fail, it's really hard for you to take. So like somebody says, oh man, I'm having marital problems. It's like, welcome to the club. Like, you think you're special because you're having marital problems? It's like, oh, I don't have money to make payroll today. Really? Do you think you're special because you don't have money to make payroll? You're not special. Like, you're not special because you filed bankruptcy. You're not special because you have marital problems. You're not special because sometimes you yell at your kids and you shouldn't. Like, all those things are so human. But if your ego is so way up here where you think you're supposed to be, so godlike, then it really affects you. And that's the problem. I mean, in a way, I was so ego driven that I couldn't speak about it. Get over yourself, right? You're not that special to think that you're the only person in the world who's ever failed, who's ever had marital problems, who ever has a wayward child. You're not that special.
Dude, we got on this podcast. We're gonna have to end it pretty soon, but we got on this podcast to talk about stuff that we didn't even remotely get into.
Yeah, we did. It's been an hour now, except for the first 10 minutes were a redo. So
Exactly.
It's been like 45 minutes.
But we didn't even redo
It's been fun for me.
We didn't even redo the stuff that we originally talked about. Maybe that'll show up on the show. But I think this is really important because I haven't talked to my audience about failures like this before. And so this is a new conversation to the Franchise Secrets group. And we're inside this Facebook group as well. So, but I really do. I'm people that see me online, hear me on the podcast, and then they get to know me. They're like, you are just who you say you are. The way that you are.
Yeah,
in the
you are, man. Yeah.
Is just how you are. But I'm so glad that we went here because we are in the middle of this pandemic and we have friends that are losing businesses and they're dealing with this right now and they might not know it's okay to talk to people. Give us some hope. Like give us some of the, how you came out of this once you started to, own up to it and talk about it.
Yeah.
And like, what's the other side look like?
Man,
or your journey, at least, like, what was your journey out of that?
It took a long time. It took a long time to go from complete failure. And I made it worse because I didn't deal with it. So, I mean, even technically speaking, I could have held on to more of, I had 4 homes that I foreclosed on. And when I look at it now, I was so fearful of that foreclosure process and what people would think about it and how public would that be that I lost all these homes. And yet, if I had dealt with it head on, I probably could have kept them. Think about that for a second. Think how crazy it is. Just by me not wanting to deal with it, I've lost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. That could have counted in the millions if I had kept real estate from 2008 till now, because it took so long. I remember one of those homes didn't foreclose for like 2.5 years. And I let it go and I didn't want to deal with it, which is so stupid. It's so crazy. So when you talk about hope, realize that you got to look at this in not a year period or 2-year period, but in a 10-year period. Where are you going to be 10 years from now is going to be dependent on what you do over these next 2 or 3 years. And these next 2 or 3 years is going to be trudging through mud. It's going to be pretty terrible. It's not going to feel good. You'll have a hard time in your business, in your relationships, in your marriage, in your parenthood, your motherhood, all those things that you're in. But 10 years from now, you're going to be okay. And that's the only way that you can have hope, is knowing that this is temporary. And it is. All this stuff you're going through is absolutely temporary. So for me, it was not realizing that, by the way. I only realized it was temporary when I started to make a little bit more money. And I was able to buy a home again. I was able to put money again in the bank. And then I felt really hopeful again. I was like, oh, okay. I guess it wasn't so bad, right? I guess those times weren't so bad. And one more story I want to tell you is, for about 5 years, I think it was, we lived in this little condo here. Hey, Gabe.
Oh, hello.
Hi, buddy. That's Gabriel, who always makes an appearance in my videos. So I have a fridge down here, and Gabriel likes to come and grab snacks. This is Erik. This is Gabriel.
Hello.
How you doing? I've seen you on other podcast videos popping up with people that are pretty cool.
So this is actually a story about him. We lived in this little tiny condo here in San Clemente, and I was embarrassed of the condo. It was this duplex. It was hot. It was tiny. I didn't want people ever coming over to the house. So even a good friend of mine from Brazil came to visit me, and I hadn't seen him for 10 years, and I didn't invite him over because I was so embarrassed of where I lived. It's so stupid. But I remember we drove by there. This is about a year or two ago. And I had my boys in the car. I was like, look, there's a house, that's where we used to live. And they're like, yeah, look, there's the tree that we used to have our tree swing. And there's that empty lot that we were in. And oh, the backyard, that was such a great backyard. And I think it was either Gabriel or one of the kids were like, Dad, I wish we could live there again. I love that house. And I was like, what are you talking about? That was the worst place. I hated living there. And that's so funny, right? It's like children don't notice that kind of stuff, right? They still today, when they drive by there, they have the best memories of that house. They never saw how small it was. They never cared that it was hot. They never cared who was coming over, who wasn't. They were just so happy to play and enjoy the house. So I think that's maybe a way that we got to be as entrepreneurs, is enjoy where you are now. You'll never be happier than you are today. Doesn't matter what happens, you'll never be happier than you are today.
Dude, that is such good advice. I'm so glad that we went there, and I'm going to let you go. I'm going to ask if you can come on again and we can talk about the stuff that we're actually planning to talk about next time. And maybe I'll hit record right away. But how can people find you? If they want to find you, they want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about Amada Senior Care. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way is through LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn. It's the platform that I love. It's a platform that we've built our company on. So LinkedIn is the best way. I'm there every single day. I absolutely love it. So reach out, DM me on LinkedIn, send me a friend invite, and I'll definitely accept you, and would love to connect.
Let him know you heard on the Franchise Secrets podcast, so he knows who you are and the conversations that we've had that you've listened to. Hey, man, thanks again for coming on.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.